Okay, let's get into this, because it's such a massive change in how people lived.
A total revolution, really.
For centuries, everything in Europe is basically centered on the manor. You've got this system of farming where everyone is more or less self-sufficient.
Right, that's the key. Self-sufficiency was everything.
And then, almost suddenly, that whole model just fractures.
Yeah.
People start gathering together, building these dense, permanent towns.
So the big question is why? What was the trigger?
Exactly. What made people leave the fields to go live shoulder to shoulder behind stone walls?
Well, it wasn't a slow trickle. It was more like an economic explosion. And it was all fueled by the revival of long-distance trade
Trade with who?
with the rest of the world. After being pretty isolated, Europe starts plugging back into the global economy. And merchants weren't just moving, grain around.
Right.
They were traveling huge distances to sell high-end luxury goods. Think silk from China, rare dyes, and the big one spices like pepper and cinnamon from the East.
Okay, so that's a serious injection of cash into the system. These aren't just trinkets. These goods are driving major power shifts.
Absolutely. The demand was so intense that it basically rebuilt the sea power of places like Venice and Genoa. They became these huge financial and political hubs, changing the whole balance of power.
So you have this international trade starting the engine. How fast does that new wealth actually trickle down to, say, a local farmer?
Surprisingly quickly. Because that luxury trade needed a support system,
Yeah.
local farmers figured out they could grow more food than their family needed, a surplus,
And sell it.
and sell it, or trade it for things they couldn't make themselves, like a better iron plow or proper wool clothing. But that requires a couple of things.
A place to meet and trade.
A permanent marketplace, yeah. And crucially, safer roads to get there.
So safety becomes an economic issue. If bandits are raiding the trade routes, the whole system just grinds to a halt.
Precisely. And the local lords caught on fast. They realized that protecting the roads meant their whole region got richer, so they started policing the routes. And settlements just naturally grew around these busy, protected trading spots.
It's just logical. You want to be where the action is.
You had to be near the hub.
So when it came to actually building these towns, it's clear they weren't just random. What were the top priorities for picking a good spot?
Transportation and defense. Those were the two non-negotiables.
Okay.
The most successful towns almost always popped up near wide and navigable rivers. It was just the easiest, cheapest way to move heavy stuff like timber or stone.
Right. Water transport is key.
And we also see towns growing where old Roman roads intersected, basically using that ancient infrastructure as a head start.
And defense was everything. You needed to feel safe. So being near a big castle gave you instant protection from invaders.
Or bandits, yeah. And if there wasn't a castle, sometimes a large monastery could offer that same kind of stability and protection.
That focus on security really shaped how the towns looked, didn't it?
Oh, completely. The number one feature was the high stone wall, which was great for defense, but it immediately created a huge problem.
Jeez.
A finite, incredibly valuable resource. Space.
And that one limitation means everything inside gets crammed together. The streets are narrow, probably only wide enough for a cart.
And paved with rough cobblestones. Not easy to get around.
So to maximize their living area, the buildings had to go vertical.
Exactly. Houses were tall and skinny. And you know that classic medieval look where the upper floors hang out over the street?
Yeah.
That wasn't for looks. It was a clever way to get more square footage upstairs without taking up precious ground space.
But the building materials, mostly wood and plaster, right? Which sounds like a terrifying fire hazard.
A constant threat. A single spark could take out an entire city block in minutes because everything was built so close together.
And yet, towering over all of it, you'd always have one building that dominated the skyline.
Almost always a church or a massive cathedral. You could see it for miles. It was a symbol of both spiritual and really structural authority.
So we have the walls for defense, the packed-in houses, the church on the skyline. But what was the engine keeping everyone alive?
That would be the marketplace. The big, open central square.
The heart of the town.
The heart, lungs, stomach, all of it. Market days were the busiest when people from the countryside would pour in to sell their goods.
What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Everything you needed to live. Fresh bread, vegetables, but also specialized things like iron horseshoes, woven cloth, leather goods.
It was also the original social media feed, right? If you wanted the latest news or political gossip, you went to the market.
Absolutely. And all the official business was done right there, too. Tax collectors would be there, taking a cut of the sales for the Lord.
A guaranteed revenue stream?
And the town crier would stand in the square to announce new laws or festivals just to make sure everyone heard it.
Of course, that whole flow of goods relied on the skilled workers living inside the town walls. Let's talk about the craftsmen, the blacksmiths, weavers, bakers.
They were the backbone of the economy. And for them, work and life were the same thing. They lived and worked in the same building, usually with the ground floor as their shop.
And they work long hours.
Oh, sunrise to sunset, all by hand. And their reputation, their entire livelihood, depended on the quality of their work.
Which brings us to the guilds. They needed a system to protect their craft and control quality. Let's start with the merchant guilds.
The merchant guilds were all about economic control. They were powerful, organized groups that protected their members' businesses.
How so?
They set prices to stop people from undercutting each other, and they controlled who was even allowed to sell certain items in the town.
Yeah.
If you weren't in the guild, you were locked out.
That sounds a lot like a modern monopoly. Were they ever accused of, keeping prices too high?
Oh, sure. They were definitely anti-competitive, and they didn't apologize for it, but they justified it by also providing a social safety net.
What do you mean?
They used membership fees to help the families of members who got sick or died, and all that money translated directly into political power. These guilds often ended up helping run the local government.
Then you had the other type of guild, the craft guilds.
Right, for specific trades like bakers or carpenters, their main job was quality control.
And they were serious about it.
They were ruthless. Guild inspectors would go around to workshops to make sure materials were good, that no one was using cheap or fake stuff.
Do we have examples of that?
Yeah, there are records of inspectors smashing loaves of bread that had too much sawdust mixed in, or fining weavers for using cheap fibers. They enforced a high standard to protect the town's reputation for quality goods.
And if a craftsman got caught cheating?
They could face huge fines or even lose their license to work. The guilds also kept things stable by setting fair wages and limiting how many new shops could open, which reduced competition.
But this system, the guild system, it also created something new. A clear path for someone to move up in society through hard work.
It was a very clear ladder. First, you started as an apprentice.
So a young boy living with a master craftsman.
Exactly. Living in his home, learning the absolute basics of the trade. You didn't get paid a wage, just food, shelter, and clothing.
And after a few years of that, you could become a journeyman.
Right. And that's when you finally started earning a daily wage. The name literally means daily man. You might travel, work for different masters, and really perfect your skills.
And then the final step was becoming a master. How did you do that?
To become a master, you had to create a masterpiece.
A literal masterpiece.
A single, perfect item that proved you had completely mastered the craft. Maybe a complex lock if you were a metal worker, or a perfect suit of clothes if you were a tailor.
Who judged it?
A panel of all the existing masters in the guild. If they approved it, you were in. You could open your own shop, hire your own apprentices, and achieve real economic independence.
That ability to move up was huge.
Yeah.
But the towns offered an even bigger kind of freedom, didn't they? Freedom from the whole feudal system.
That's maybe the most important part. Under feudalism, serfs were legally tied to their lord's land, but towns had this famous rule.
The year-and-a-day rule.
Exactly. If a serf could escape their manor and live inside a town's walls for a year and a day, they were legally free. It was the ultimate escape hatch.
And the towns themselves fought for their own freedom, too. They set up their own laws, their own courts.
They'd often get a special document from the king or a lord called a charter. This was basically a license to govern themselves, collect their own taxes, run their own affairs. It really weakened the power of the old feudal lords.
Okay, but let's be realistic about daily life here. This freedom and opportunity came with a serious downside. Towns were incredibly crowded and, well, filthy.
The conditions are hard for us to even imagine. Shocking, really. There was no organized sanitation, so diseases like typhus and cholera just spread like wildfire.
Because there was no trash collection. People just threw their waste, including human waste, straight into the street from their windows.
Which is why you had pigs and rats everywhere. They were basically the unofficial cleanup crew. And the water from town wells was often contaminated by waste from businesses like tanneries.
And you have to remember, they had no idea what germs were. Their understanding of medicine was based on prayer or herbal remedies. Yet, despite all that danger and squalor, people just kept coming.
The pull of freedom and making your own way was just that strong.
And it wasn't all just work and disease. There was a real social life.
Oh, yeah. Leisure time was often built around religious festivals and holy days. These were huge community parties.
You'd have plays performed on wagons in the street, and sports like wrestling, archery,
And a very, very rough version of football. Probably brutal.
and the community was really built in places like the marketplace and the taverns.
Definitely. Traveling entertainers like jugglers and musicians would perform for coins. And the taverns were more than just places to drink. That's where business deals were made, where political ideas were debated, where connections were forged.
So in the end, the rise of towns was more than just a change in geography. It fundamentally remade European society.
It created a brand new group of people, the middle class. They weren't nobles, and they weren't peasants tied to the land. Their status came from their skill and their money.
Which means wealth was no longer just about how much land you owned. Money and trade became the new measures of power.
And that shift was the beginning of the end for the feudal system.
Crucially, towns also became centers for ideas. Information and new concepts spread way faster in a crowded city than in an isolated village.
And that concentration of people and ideas led directly to the first universities, which pushed forward progress in art, science, and law.
So medieval towns were messy, loud, dangerous places.
Absolutely, constantly dealing with fire and disease. But they were also places of incredible opportunity, freedom, and innovation.
They really laid the groundwork for the modern world we live in today.
They really did. So the next time you walk down a busy city street, think about it. The crowds, the shops, the speed of it all, that energy is a direct legacy of those narrow, walled towns from the Middle Ages.
Good luck with your studies.